Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 26th of February. So coming to the first article, Coalition of the Concerned. Now this is an important article because unlike various other articles that are coming on India-Pakistan relations after the Pulwama, this is new in the fact that it is discussing about the policy of diplomatic isolation which India has been following. So that is also the context. Now here you should know that this policy of diplomatic isolation against Pakistan is what came into existence after the Uri attacks, and this is something that India has increased even further in the aftermath of the Pulwama attacks. An analysis of this particular policy followed by India is something that is vital for us. A question can directly come on this, and that is what this editorial is doing. So coming to the issues, the first issue which has been discussed is the visit of the Saudi Arabia Crown Prince, that is Mohammed bin Salman. He was on a visit to both Pakistan as well as India in the aftermath of the Pulwama attack. So this visit is what is taken as an example that the leader of this particular country had come to both the countries, and in no way could India convince the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to take a particular side. The Crown Prince tried to maintain a de-hyphenated relation with both India as well as Pakistan. So this is one stark example that this policy is not a successful one and it cannot succeed. That is something that is important here. Another issue is the need for a new diplomacy. Now clearly, if this particular diplomacy or this particular diplomatic strategy is what has failed, then a new strategy is what is required. So the editorial calls for a new strategy, which is a coalition strategy against the terrorism that is emanating from Pakistan. Here the author discusses that unlike India's efforts in the direction of isolating Pakistan, India should rather make efforts towards forming a coalition of countries that are against terrorism that is emanating from Pakistan. So this kind of a policy is what India needs to follow. The third issue is with regards to countries facing terror attacks. Now, in line with the idea of a new diplomatic policy, the author is suggesting that the countries that are facing terror attacks, primarily India is one which is facing terror attacks. Also, Iran, you should know, is facing terror attacks which are emanating from Pakistan. Afghanistan is one. Because of Afghanistan, several other countries are going to be interested in peace of Afghanistan. So this is one leverage point based on which India can form a coalition against Pakistan. Another thing which has been highlighted and which is very, very important are some global examples of isolation. Now here the editorial discusses that in the past what we have seen is that United States of America has tried this policy, especially in the case of Iran as well as in the case of North Korea. But in both these cases, US failed to completely isolate these countries. This is something that cannot happen and India needs to learn from USA's example. Also, even if US was at one point of time at loggerheads with North Korea, it was trying to isolate North Korea. What is happening today is that US is eventually talking to the leaders of North Korea. Because maybe in diplomacy, that is the only solution that two countries have. So how is it that India is ignoring this big example and it is cutting off ties with Pakistan and it is attempting to isolate it? So a criticism of the isolationist policy is what has been done vis-a-vis global examples, and this is something that is going to be important for us also. Another thing which is important is the coalition, which is more powerful as a tool. Now here the editorial discusses the example of the Financial Action Task Force as we had discussed yesterday. Yesterday also we had discussed that this is one of the most strong steps which has been taken against Pakistan. And this is a step that is taken by a coalition of intergovernmental bodies. So this is something that is important, that a coalition is much more successful than an isolationist effort. France, for that matter, is making efforts in the United Nations Security Council to condemn the Pulwama attack. So that is again a coalition which is acting against Pakistan. So this is the line of thought which has been advocated in the editorial. The next issue is the case of Masood Azhar. Now here you should know that India is trying to give Masood Azhar the status of a global terrorist, but this is something that is being stopped by China in the UNSC, in the United Nations Security Council. Now, Masood Azhar is not only somebody who is convicted in India, he is somebody who is globally wanted for terrorism. In US, for instance, since 1992, he's on the radar of US as a criminal there. Further, you should know that he was released by India in exchange for the hostages on board of flight IC-814. This was the flight which was hijacked from India. So here the editorial is saying that because it was in exchange for the hostages of this particular flight that he was released, what India should try and do is that all the passengers in this particular flight, whichever country they belong to, India should urge all those countries to come against Masood Azhar and call for his being given the status of a global terrorist. That is something that India should attempt at doing. And also the countries where this particular flight took a halt, for instance, it took a halt in Nepal, UAE and Afghanistan. These countries should also be brought on board against Masood Azhar, and for that matter, in the bigger picture, against Pakistan. So that is one analysis which has been given here. Another thing which has been analyzed is the pushback that India might experience from Pakistan. Now, if India is going to take such actions against Pakistan, if it is going to try and form a coalition against Pakistan, obviously Pakistan is not going to sit idle. So a pushback from Pakistan is what is going to happen. And what kind of a pushback can happen? First, Pakistan always attempts to internationalize the Kashmir issue. For India, it is a cause of concern that Kashmir issue remains bilateral. But for Pakistan, it is always attempting to make this issue an international issue. So India should be wary of that and prepared for that. And another thing which has been highlighted is that Pakistan nowadays tries to link India-Pakistan relation with Afghanistan. Whenever India takes a stand against Pakistan globally, Pakistan wants that this might impact Pakistan's role in Afghanistan, and this becomes a cause of concern for countries like the US and Russia who want peace in Afghanistan. So in that case, what is being highlighted in the editorial is that India should analyze the role of Pakistan in Afghanistan and should globally make a case that Pakistan's role in Afghanistan should be de-hyphenated from India-Pakistan relation, and this is one important analysis of this particular editorial. Another thing which is important here is the role of countries like US, China and Saudi Arabia. These three countries are major players in Pakistan, and these three countries have a major role to play here. For instance, what has been highlighted in the editorial is that US for a long time has been carrying out drone strikes in Pakistan. But it is somehow surprising that never has US targeted any Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed camps. The Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed camps are the ones which are more active against India. So what India can do is that it can use its leverage with the US, and it can request the US to strike camps of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed in Pakistan. Also, vis-a-vis China, the editorial is suggesting that India has never made a single most important demand to China vis-a-vis banning of Masood Azhar. Now, what the editorial now is discussing is that soon what is upcoming is the Russia-India-China meeting in Beijing, and in that context, the External Affairs Minister of India should convey to China that India's single most important demand is the banning of Masood Azhar, and it is then that China might take some action against Masood Azhar. Another thing that should be highlighted to China is that it is not in China's interest if the region around the China-Pakistan economic corridor is what is hit by terrorism. So this is something that is in China's interest, and this is what India should bring to China's notice and highlight. Another issue is vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia. Now, in the present time, Saudi Arabia is wary of funding extremism. It itself is troubled by Iran, which it accuses of funding extremist groups. So on that ground, India should make this case to Saudi Arabia, that Saudi Arabia should make it a point that its funding into Pakistan is no way going to terrorist groups, and that is what India can get as a benefit from Saudi Arabia if India tries. So these are some probabilities which have been highlighted in the editorial. So this is something that becomes important. Another thing which is important and which has been analyzed, and which is also the opinion of this article, is India's current strategy. Now here the editorial discusses that calling off dialogue with Pakistan is never an option. And another thing is that at present India is following a policy of on dialogue and off dialogue. This kind of instability in the policy is something that is not warranted. Rather, a steady non-political dialogue is what is warranted with Pakistan. This is another one thing very important which has been analyzed, which I forgot to mention, is about SAARC. Now, whenever you are getting a question on India-Pakistan, you must highlight SAARC. Now, what has happened is that this is a South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. This body is what has suffered maximum because of the backfall or downgrading of the India-Pakistan relation. And it is this particular body which has all the strength to actually resolve the matters between India and Pakistan. So what is the need of the hour is that if SARC is strengthened, if the interest of the entire region is what becomes involved between India and Pakistan, then it might become a bigger deterrent for Pakistan to invoke terrorist activities in India. And in the larger interest of the region, the relation between India and Pakistan is something that can normalize. So this is one line of thought, this is one opinion which you must replicate in your answers whenever you have an opportunity of discussing India-Pakistan relation. So that's the entire analysis of this particular article. Coming to the next article, the correct prescription. Now this is an important article. The context is with regards to the entry of e-pharmacies in the medicine market and its outcomes. Now e-pharmacies, as you all know, are selling medicines via websites or for that matter through their apps. Now they are being accused of distorting the medicine market. Now coming to the issues which have been discussed, the first issue is with regards to the All India Organization of Chemists and Druggists. Now this is basically a trade organization, and this organization comprises of 8.4 lakh pharmacists in India. According to this particular editorial, this particular trade organization is criticizing the e-pharmacy companies, and it is saying that this entire system of e-pharmacy is a threat to these jobs, that is 8.4 lakh jobs in India. So that is one thing which has been highlighted here. Now the second analysis is with regards to the benefits of e-pharmacies. Now, these e-pharmacies are offering medicines for sale at a discount of at least 20% when we compare it to the traditional pharmacists. And also this is with an added advantage of home delivery. So these e-pharmacies are something that are of immense benefit to the customers. That is one analysis. The third issue is vis-a-vis the legality of these e-pharmacies. Now here, the trade organization of pharmacists is accusing that this is not legal, and that is also one case because the draft rules for the e-pharmacies is something that was framed in the year 2018, but till now they have not been notified, nor has a law for regulation of e-pharmacies been passed. So the need of the hour is that some legality be provided, some proper regulation be provided to the e-pharmacies. That is something that has been discussed here. Another issue is with regards to the threat to public health. Now here, the trade organization of pharmacists are making a case that these e-pharmacies might result in drug abuse or for that matter substandard medicines, and this is what could be a threat to the public health. But the editorial discusses that these issues of drug abuse and substandard medicine is something that is already existing. So there is nothing more of a threat to public health that can be offered by e-pharmacies. So this is a baseless criticism against e-pharmacies, and that is what has been discussed. Another very, very important analysis here is with regards to the cartelization. Now this cartelization is something that is done by the pharmacists in the country. What they do is that they often tend to reduce the supply of medicines, and this leads to an inflation of the medicine prices. Also, what happens amongst these pharmacists is that there is a lack of competition between them. They do not offer any discounts, and as a result of lack of competition, there is no incentive for improving their efficiency. And these competitors are colluding with themselves to fix the sale price and an area of operation, as a result of which the competitive reduction of price in medicines is what is not happening, and the consumer is being harmed, despite the fact that such kind of cartelization is what is illegal as per India's Competition Act. This is something that is continuing, and this is something that e-pharmacies can break, and this is going to be the major benefit of e-pharmacies in India. Another analysis is with regards to the requirement of an NOC. Now this NOC is what is often, so it is something that is illegal, and this NOC is something that is required from trade associations for pharma companies. Now whenever a pharma company wants to appoint a new stockist in a particular area, it has to get an NOC from these trade organization of pharmacists in that particular region. Now as per the government rule, there is no such requirement for an NOC, but this is something that continues to happen even today. Now fewer the number of stockists of medicine in a particular region, the lesser will be the competition. So this is an entire nexus that is taking place, and which is curbing competition in the medicine market, and this is something that is hampering the consumer. So this is something vis-a-vis the medicine market which has been analyzed, and that is what is warranting the need of e-pharmacies. The Competition Commission of India had also suggested that it is the e-pharmacies which can break such kind of malpractices in the medicine market. Another analysis which has been given, and which is the most important analysis vis-a-vis e-pharmacies, is about affordable healthcare. Now here you need to understand that in India, the cost of healthcare is increasing day by day. And accessibility and affordability of medicines is one of major concerns for India. So if in such a situation, a competition in the market is what is increased through e-pharmacies, lesser prices of medicines is what is being made available to the citizens of India, then it is something that Indian government should nowhere refuse, and rather it should encourage it. So that is what is the importance of e-pharmacies. They will make medicines affordable, accessible, and that is something that is going to be in the interest of the Indian citizen vis-a-vis their healthcare. So that is the entire analysis of e-pharmacies. This is an important topic because healthcare as such is a very important topic, and there you can get an opportunity to discuss about e-pharmacies. So that is going to be the relevance. Coming to the next article, before eviction. Now the context here is with regards to Supreme Court's order to evict the occupants of forest lands who fail to make a successful claim for tenure under the Forest Rights Act of 2006. The context is what we have discussed previously also. Some newer issues is what have been highlighted here. The first issue is with regards to the continuing dilemma. Now what is this dilemma vis-a-vis the Forest Rights Act is that the Forest Rights Act tries to reconcile the inalienable tribal rights with the biodiversity conservation projects in India. So this is something that is continuing even today. The Supreme Court has ordered for the eviction of these claimants in the interest of the wildlife. So what is being important here is that a conflict is what is emerging between the tribals as well as the wildlife. So this is something that is continuing even today. The second analysis is the achievement of FRA. Now, it is not that this act is a complete failure. A complete criticism of this act is what we are seeing in the recent editorials. But this editorial highlights some achievement of it. It says that out of the 44 lakh claimants, the applications for claims is what was there before the FRA Act. Out of these, approximately 23 have got hereditary rights in the forest lands under the FRA. So it cannot be said that this act was completely a failure because a large number of people have benefited from this act. So that is an achievement of the FRA. Another issue which has been discussed is with regards to the self-assessment by states. Now here, as we had discussed previously also, that the Zaza committee which was formed had also highlighted that these states have often had some lapses, some procedural lapses, which has caused in the denial of claims under FRA to a large number of people. So it is time for the states. There are 17 states who have been asked to ensure eviction. These 17 states should do some self-assessment, and they should make a note that it is not because of their mistake that some genuine deserving aspirant for the FRA has been not given a claim under the FRA Act. So this is something that the states themselves need to do. Another thing which is very, very important here is with regards to the ideal intent. Now here you should know that the ideal intent of the Forest Rights Act was that forests are something that need to be conserved by the communities, also with individuals living in that particular region, who are going to continue living there by taking some product of the forest produce at a sustainable level. And this is something that was a model that was envisaged under the FRA, and this was something that was a model that was an integrated model for conservation, and this would not lead to the conflict between tribal versus wildlife. But this is something that has not happened. The ideal intent of this particular act has failed to manifest. Rather, a conflict does exist, and what is happening is that the tribals feel that their interests are being lost, and the wildlife conservationists feel that the wildlife is what is being hampered. So that is one analysis which has been given here. Another thing that you should know vis-a-vis this act is that before this act, what India was following was a colonial paradigm, where forest was treated as a resource that was to be run by an opaque bureaucracy. And this is something that the government was doing even after independence. And another thing is that what happened because of this system was that sometimes precious old growth of trees was what was replaced by monocultures such as teak. This we are seeing even today in the form of compensatory afforestism. So the analysis here is that the government strategies otherwise are also not very successful. So this criticism by the Supreme Court that it is the FRA which has resulted in destruction of forests is also an excessive criticism. So that is one analysis. Another thing that you need to know here is the current scenario. Now, in the current scenario, you should know that the forests have shrunk to 5% of the land in terms of the protected areas, and human pressures on forests is something that is increasing. The landscapes are alienated for resource exploitation, and dams are what are being built in this area, and development is what is being done, roads are being constructed, and also there is a lot of conflict between man and wildlife. A lot of wildlife is what is being lost. So this is what is the current scenario, and this is what is warranting that the government does take some steps in the conservation of the forest. And these steps should be such that they are very much a balance between the rights of the tribal as well as that of the wildlife. So even if the government has to give claims under the FRA, those claims need to purely be justified, keeping in mind the current scenario. Another analysis which has been given in the editorial is that of resettlement and rehabilitation. Now, if the current scenario is a cause of concern, then a new option of rehabilitation and resettlement of the tribals living in the core areas is something that is indeed going to be warranted later or sooner. So in this regard, the editorial discusses an example of the Nagarhole National Park. Now he says that whenever appropriate compensation, livelihood and appropriate rehabilitation is what is offered to the tribals have time and again agreed for rehabilitation, but the role of the government in this entire rehabilitation process has to be a responsible one. It has to be a humane role which the government is performing, so that the tribals here do not feel exploited and their rights are what are upheld. So that is what is the entire analysis of this particular editorial. We have time and again been discussing this article, and this is an important topic for this year's mains. So coming to the next article, Prepoll gambit. Now this is not a very important one, but few points are important. Coming to the context says that the GST Council recommended a dramatic reduction in the indirect tax rates payable on under construction properties. So the tax rate, the GST rates on under construction properties is what has been reduced. It has been reduced from 8% to 1% on affordable homes and from 12% to 5% on other residential properties. So these are the rates which have been reduced. First and foremost issue that is important is that you get an opportunity to know that what is affordable homes. Now affordable homes are homes which have a cost less than 45 lakh. They have a carpet area of 60 meters square in metros and approximately 90 meters square in other areas. So these are some limits for affordable homes. This can be a question in PT also. Now, what are the benefits of reducing the interest rates? The first benefit is to the consumer. Housing is something that is a major need for India, and in that case, if the taxes are what are reduced, the consumer is definitely going to benefit. Another benefit will be to the entire real estate sector because it is facing a slump, and you should know that the real estate sector is the largest employer in India at present. So in that context also, the real estate sector is going to benefit. That is going to be in the interest of the entire economy. The third analysis, which is the most important analysis here, is the stability of the GST regime. Now, this is something that has happened as a pre-poll gambit. Now, the editorial is discussing that such frequent structural tinkering ahead of electoral battles is what is emerging as the biggest challenge to the stabilization of India's fledgling GST regime. And this is what is the cause of concern. You might have opportunity to discuss issues like one election, one country, or such kind of populist measures which the government takes which are not in the interest of the economy. So this can be one ideal example of that just before the polls, the government has reduced the GST on real estate. So that is going to be the relevance here. Coming to the next article, Reimagining Delhi. Now, for many, this might not be an important one because it is a case of Delhi, but I would suggest that don't deal it as a particular case of Delhi itself, but rather make this article a source of understanding of urbanization as a larger picture. General Studies paper 1 has a topic on urbanization, and many a times we are seeing questions on that. So this article has some good points vis-a-vis analysis of urbanization. The first point is cities versus public perception. Now here the analysis is of these first two points, rather urban problems as well as the first point as cities versus public perception. A new idea is what has been given is that cities are a crucible of public perception about the government itself, about the functioning of the government is something that can be analyzed by seeing the conditions of urban areas. And also the urban problems are not something that are urban, they are national problems. So this is a newer way to look at urbanization as a indicator of government's performance. So that is one important analysis here. Another thing which has been analyzed is with regards to the too many cooks The saying is that too many cooks spoil the broth, and that is also what is happening in urban governance. What has happened is that there are too many institutions which have overlapping jurisdiction. They have contradictory goals, and what is happening because of this is that there is a suboptimal outcome that is happening because of so many bodies which are functioning in a single area, and that is the major problem vis-a-vis urban governance. Another thing which has been analyzed is migration. We all know that migration from rural to urban areas is on a rise, and it is expected to expand even more. So in that case, what becomes important is environmental and waste management in the urban areas, and this is something that is clearly not happening. Urban areas are turning into urban slums. There is a problem of illegal construction, improper waste management. So all of these issues is what is emerging in urban areas, and that is something that has been highlighted here. Another issue which is very, very important vis-a-vis urban governance is the accountability of urban governance. This is something that is a major lapse in case of India's urban governance, and this is what needs to be restored for efficiency in urban management. Another issue which has been discussed here and which is the most important aspect here is vis-a-vis technology. I have highlighted this aspect. Now, several ideas is what has been given here. The first is that there should be a use of biotechnology in waste disposal in India. Also, there should be technology in the building and for that matter, making buildings cost effective. So these are some ideas which have been used vis-a-vis the use of technology in urban governance. This is what is going to make urban centers smart centers. So that is one important analysis of this editorial. And then another analysis which is important here is with regards to governance and delivery. Now what has been suggested is that the governance and delivery in urban areas is what should be compact, it should be less diffuse, and it should be pruned. This is what is going to usher a paradigm of proper urban management. So these are the ideas that we can replicate in our analysis on any urban center, on the analysis of smart cities, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. These are going to be some good points. So that is why I have picked up this article for discussion. Now that's all for today. I thank you all for watching.